Okay, but today we are talking about a really good topic. I feel like I've been talking to clients about this a ton, but I feel like I wrote this in the email, but I had this conversation with someone the other day that just made me go, oh, this is why it's confusing. Let me talk about this in a different way. So that's what I want to do today. Because this person that I was having a chat with, she kind of mentioned like this standard in marketing. She's like, yeah, well, everyone says X. And I'm like, oh, everyone does say X. And now I see why that's confusing, based on like what I think is working right now. So I really want to talk about that because I think it's quite a big thing. Because when I heard her say it, I was like, immediately light bulb, like this is why it's confusing. So we're going to talk about why it's confusing. Because I think there's just been a lot of shifts in the last few years, and I think there's so many people that are like, what used to work for me isn't working quite how it used to or how I thought it would or any of that. And, I think that can really freak people out instead of just being like, oh, okay, well, let's just look at what changed. And that's why I've been trying to be so vocal about that lately, because I feel like it is such an easy place for so many great entrepreneurs to feel like they're not cutting it or this is the time for them to leave or shut down because they can't like figure it out. And I think these things are some of the reasons it feels like harder to figure out because we have these kind of like tried and true ways of doing things. And yes, we need foundations, but also like we have to kind of be willing to question them a lot. And so hopefully this helps. So I'm going to share with you what the thing is and then we'll kind of get into it. But the thing she was saying, she's like, well, every like marketing training and thing and whatever says make it about them, don't make it about you. And so, excuse me, she was talking about like the idea of making it about the audience, not making it about yourself. And I thought that was so perfectly said because I do feel like that's what we've said. Hey, Deborah, I feel like that is what we've said for years. I feel like almost every big marketing program probably teaches some version of that. I feel like if I look at how I built my business and in some regard, that's exactly how I built my business. It's about making it about the clients and not myself. However, I think that, hey, Crystal, I think that a lot of that has changed recently. And here's what I mean by that. I don't mean like your clients don't matter or their results don't matter or anything like that. But I will say that I do think how we're talking about those things has changed quite a bit. So I'm going to get really specific with some things, but first I want to like kind of talk high level on it. Meaning, um, like if you look at what's performing well across the board in marketing, it's storytelling, it's personal stories, it's hearing someone else's experience. Like we are so over being talked at, right? We want to be talked to, we want to be talked with. We are so over the fake gurus who are coming out and being like, here's what you need to know, kind of thing, right? Hey, Rebecca. Um, you know what I just remembered? I forgot to say what our giveaway was today. You guys know the drill. For joining me, for saying hey, any comment, question, whatever. We always do a giveaway. It's a thank you for being here each week. So $100 gift card is the thing today. So I want to say that before I forgot. But yeah, I think that Michelle is she's always our community supporter here. So anyway, I feel like we've really gotten to a point where like that advice is helpful, but it's not clear enough anymore. Like, yes, we need to make it about our audience, but I think the way we make it about them really, really matters right now. And I think a lot of that type of content that used to be really popular, where you were talking more at someone like you were a guru or like you knew better than them or whatever, just doesn't land in quite the same way that it used to. Like if you look at like, let's take reels, for example. Like if you look at reels that are performing, I think best across the board, and I don't just mean even in the coaching piece, although totally that, but I just mean like in general, almost all of them are sharing something personal that someone else can relate to versus talking at someone. So like, example, 5 things you should do this week if you want to insert thing, right? Like 5 things you should do this week if you want to make more money in your business. That probably wouldn't perform that well, to be honest with you. But if you made, like, say it's me, say I made 5 things to do this week if you want to make more money in your business, I probably wouldn't make that real. But if I made one that was like 5 things I'm doing this week to make more money in my business, I bet that one would perform. I bet people would share that. I bet people would comment on that. I bet that would create traction, et cetera, right? Why is that working better now than 5 things you should do to make money in your business this week? Well, because nobody wants to interact with that. Like, that's just something you're telling me, right? And I like maybe or maybe don't even care what you have to say. But that part of me that's like curious about what is someone else doing? What does that look like? Is so different. My desire to engage on someone talking about themselves in that way is totally different than someone talking at me, right? I think we are just, again, so over that kind of like fake guru in our space that I think we have a reaction to when people are kind of like showing up in our feed talking to us like we don't know something. And maybe we even like the content, but Michelle said, I feel like you need to make this reel now. I know, I'm like noting down the reel that I will make this week. I probably should write that down. 5 things this week. But like, I'll tell you from my perspective, like when I see things perform well on social, like engagement's not everything. I think the way in which people engage now is vastly different, but I will say what things like that do is tell Instagram or any social platform, right? What people are interested in and to give it to more people. So you guys know I've talked a lot about like the Instagram is always right philosophy, right? So it's like if we know that save, shares, engagement, comments, all of that kind of stuff is what's going to help your message get in front of more people, then creating something that people do want to engage with, do want to share, do want to comment on is obviously and naturally going to contribute to your success. Am I saying that's what makes you a sale? No. Am I saying that that long game of getting in front of people more readily with your message and them feeling connected to you is going to make you a sale? Yes. Right? So this idea, make it about them, make it about them. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you. It doesn't have enough context anymore for the type of social environment we're in. Like if we're talking about you talking about results and sales, sure, make it about them and what you can help them with. But quite honestly, I think people still care about your results and how you got that. Do I think that that should always be the case? Do I think you have to hire a coach who's gotten the exact results you want? No, but I think that you want to hire a coach that you admire in some way or look up to in some way. It doesn't have to be the exact way. But again, if we don't feel connected at all to that person, I don't think we're making sales anymore either, right? So I really feel like we have to start letting go of that idea that like we have to make it about them, don't make it about you, because that is just very obviously not what's performing. And I mean, that's what we have to think about, right? I feel like, again, is making it about them in terms of what problem you can help them solve, what results you can help them get, absolutely essential, of course. But the packaging of that, the way you talk about it, the messaging behind that, if you are not including yourself in your marketing right now, it is going to be very hard to be successful at it. And I can tell you this from someone who didn't really want to have to do that. Like, this isn't me being like, this comes so easily to me. And, like you should get on board. This is me going, hi, I also was kicking and screaming around this. This is not my favorite thing. I love spotlight on my clients. I love the focus to be on them, right? However, I also feel like in order to be able to put the focus on them and spotlight on them, if it takes me framing it in a slightly different way or including myself a little bit more, I'm willing to do that. So I'm just saying this is not coming from someone who's like, yay, this comes so easily to me and I'm telling you this is how we should do it. I'm saying this as someone who looks at the data, looks at numbers around this all the time, is obsessed with looking at how many like views each reel I see is getting and how they're performing for different people and different things like that. And it's just what's working. Like strategically, this is the best way to reach people right now. And I think it's important to say that. Lacey said, do you think there's a way to use that pivot with a free call? Yeah, totally. I mean, I think in that case, right, helping them see like, and I mean, like, this is some of what we've always talked about, right? But I think the way I would have framed a free call in the past would be much more like, here's what's in it for you. And I think the way I'd frame a free call now, a little bit more so, would be like, here's why you want to get on a call with me. And like, again, I'm not saying that that's like always the most fun. Like for me, that's not my preference would be to be like, here's why you should get on a free call with me in terms of what I can do for you. And I think we can still include that. But being able to say it in a way of like, and specifically, here's why I'm the right person to help you. Here's my story about this specifically. I think that that's going to go a lot better from this point. So like to like go granular, if I was going to make that into a reel instead of being like, whatever, want to know how to shift your content for more sales, get on a free call with me. I wouldn't do that reel, right? What I would probably do is like, when I made this one shift in my own content, XYZ thing happened, right? And then I would talk to them more about like, okay, so when I saw this, I realized this, I changed this. I would love to help give you that same perspective shift, blah, blah. So I would lead more with my storytelling. I hope that's helpful. Let me know, Lacey, if I can go more specific there. Kate says, yeah, one thing. Hey, Kate. Kate says, one thing I realized was helpful for me and them was to use my story to give vocabulary to their experience problem. Spot on. I think there's so much we can say there. Mixing the empathy experience with the teaching content helped do both the growth, then the trust over time. Exactly. I think that is so spot on, right? Like one of the things that I think is so important right now is that you can touch on such a specific note of feeling or emotion that makes your people feel seen and understood. So exactly what Kate is saying, right? Where it's like, if I'm telling my story, I'm touching on something that really hits for them in that. So it's still about them in the sense that like, I'm probably not going to tell a story that like they could never, ever like relate to. But I think it's so much easier to digest when you're hearing it about someone else. So one of my clients, I'll give her, she's the perfect example of this. So she, I'm trying to think of like how specific I want to be, but I think it's fine. She is an intuitive eating dietitian. And so for a long time, a lot of the content that was working was very teachy, very like, here's 5 ways to incorporate intuitive eating into your world or whatever, you know what I mean? And in many ways that grew her business and her account. You know, she did a lot of like, do this, don't do that kind of posts, like really successfully grew for many years with that. And it just doesn't work quite as well anymore in that way. And so she has now pivoted a lot to, telling her story about like how much she used to struggle and when she used to binge and overeat and what different triggers were for her and how she shifted that. And she literally goes viral all the time. I mean, all the time. I think her like in the last like couple of months, she's probably had 4, 5, 6 reels go over 1 million views because she's telling that personal story. She's still teaching through it. She's still sharing value and valuable information, right? But to come across a reel that's like, you know, the thing I did to stop binge eating, blah, 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 blah. She says it in a much more, you know, personal and emotionally driven way, but obviously not being specific here, versus a reel that was like, if you're binge eating, here's what you need to do to stop. Like our systems are just translating that in a different way, right? Hey, Morgana. Good. I'm so glad that makes sense. So I think that's the perfect example of what Kate was saying of like, you can still teach, you still want to share value. It's not like we're getting so far away from that value doesn't matter. I think the packaging does a bit though. I think we're so tired of people just coming at us, right? And I think when someone frames it in that different way of like, I've been there, I get it. It feels like this, it looks like this. I have been right where you are is everything. And in some ways, like that has always been marketing. And in other ways, like there is a distinct shift, I think, in terms of like what was building accounts on social media and what is now, right? Like the building in terms of like the guru and the like 5 things you should do now kind of mentality versus like the storytelling. I think that has changed drastically. Again, and that's why thinking about the foundations matters. Like, of course, the foundation was always like, help them get that you get it, you know? But I feel like we were doing that on like an about page or something, you know? And now it's like in every single piece of marketing you put out, focus on that. And I think that makes such a difference. And so again, make it about them is still like as a whole true. The packaging, the frame of that isn't. I think another thing that's changed on that note that feels important to talk about too is how we're selling based on that. So I think just like I feel like we used to almost like want people to be in our faces, like, tell me what I should be doing, tell me what you're selling, tell me where to buy it. And I feel like that has just gotten so oversaturated, we just can't take it. And again, I think we're all a little tired of the like guru mentality. And so what I would have told clients, not, a couple of years ago or whatever, is like, hey, if you're not making sales, why don't I see you selling more in your feed? Or why are you not being more direct about this? And now I think we do not want to feel sold to all the time. And so I think we want to feel connected with in an even deeper way than we ever have. And so there's even kind of like a way this has really changed how we're selling. And so I'm not saying don't be direct or don't like get on your stories and tell people like how to buy from you, but I'm saying in terms of like, if you want to reach your people on social media, it is probably not going to happen by you posting a graphic with like your program name or something and then selling to them in the caption. Like that used to be a thing that I think is no longer a thing that's working. And I feel like it's just for the same reasons. Like we don't want to just be like talked at, sold at, have things like thrown at us in that same way. I think we're just all so burnt out on that / burnt by that. You know what I mean? Like burnt by that thing that we bought that in that way that didn't work out. So I say all this to say, I think in some ways this feels very positive. I feel like we're getting more to like connection and human to human, like, hey, like, let me be imperfect. Let me be able to tell you about me. Let me tell you my own story. Let me connect with you human to human, which love, right? And I think we're getting much softer in our selling, which I also think can be really great. I think that so many people are kind of over the like massively hard sales, massively hard sell that I think used to work quite well and be quite popular in our space. And I think it takes a little bit more nuance now than it ever did. It's not just like, hey, if you haven't sold your thing, go make a post in your feed about da da da, or like, hey, your people want to make more money, so go make a reel that says 5 things that you make more money this week. I think we have to be a lot more thoughtful about it than ever in order to do that. So I feel like before it's a little more like systematic, robotic, obvious even. And I think now it's a little more nuanced, connection based, like human element of it. And again, I think in many ways that can be good. However, excuse me, I do think it's hard for people sometimes that are so used to wanting to shine that spotlight on their clients. It's just me, like I was saying, it was for me to be like, oh, like, why do they care about this story? But I'm like, oh, because that's the easiest way to digest it. That's the easiest way to learn from it. That's the easiest way to apply it to themselves right now. And I know I learned really well like that too. So I think that makes sense. Some connection and some direct sales. Well, I actually think soft sales, honestly. I mean, certainly in your stories, like you could get on and talk about your offer and stuff like that. But like in terms of your feed and stuff, like I actually think you're gonna make you're probably gonna have better results, let's say, is how I would probably say it. And again, obviously take this for what it's worth. I don't know anyone's like individual business in this sense. But I think on social media, by and large, there's probably going to be better results from looking to make more connections, do more storytelling in your feed, and then sell in stories than more directly selling like in a post. And, for the same reasons of like, it's just not going to get in front of that many people because Instagram is more saturated now than it ever has been. So it's only going to show people the content that it has proven wants to be seen. And so does that make sense, right? Like if that content of like posting like a graphic of like, here's my program, doesn't get some good, like whatever, save, shares, comments, sends, all of that kind of stuff, within a certain amount of time, like it's just not going to go anywhere. And if it doesn't get shown to people, it's not going to be effective for you. So it's not like there's anything objectively wrong with having something like that. It's just that if you know that that's not going to create engagement for you, then it's probably not going to be your best thing. If there's something you can do there that creates a lot of engagement, that could be great. Like, for example, a lot of times you see people kind of like pitching masterclasses, opt-ins, that kind of thing, and then having ManyChat for it. So like I did this with a reel recently. I was like, I green screened like our sales strategy simulator and then said comment below for X. So that was direct, but really I was teaching about the point I was making the whole time. But that boosted the engagement pretty quickly. And so it got seen by more of my people. And so I was more likely to get a result from that. Where if I had just put up a graphic that was like, download our sales strategy simulator, like it just probably wouldn't have gotten seen. It's not like people didn't want that. You know what I mean? Kate says, I've definitely seen this in sales too. I recently had a launch and used an experiential reel that ended up cold selling my product to people who never heard of me because it spoke to them versus the posts that were more direct sales messaging. I think both is helpful, but for different people on different parts of their journey. And watching that happen really helped it click for me in that way. It was a low cost thing, but it was surprising. Yeah, totally. I think that like you nailed it, right? It's not like there's anything wrong with that direct messaging in terms of sales. Like it's not like, oh my gosh, don't sell to people. But I think I mean, for sure, that's never my message. Sell your face off, right? I think it's more like what's the packaging around it and what's the positioning. And usually when it's more emotional, when it's more storytelling, or like Kate was saying, experiential, you're probably just going to have a much better result right now. And so that's just something to think about. This whole conversation makes me want to play so much more with talking about how clothes make me feel versus how they look. I love that, Michelle. That's so good. Totally. Yeah, so we can do some direct and graphics that probably won't get seen as much. So maybe to better focus on other ways. Yeah, I mean, like, listen, it depends, right? Like, again, you like Kate said, you could experiment and try both, but I think it's just helpful to know the reason behind it, right? Of like, oh, this isn't not getting traction because people hate my program. This is not getting traction because it's not the type of content that's like built for traction. So I was saying that to one of my clients the other day is like, what I really try to think about behind what I'm creating is what's my intention of this post or this reel, right? Is it to just tell my very immediate people something? Okay, great. Like, then I might do something like that. Is it to connect, with my audience more? Okay, then I would have a different frame. Is it to get them to download something or, like comment XXX thing? Okay, then I would position that really differently. Like you kind of really want to think about like, what's the point? If I want reach, I'm going to do that totally differently than if I'm like trying to get something just to like my very close people who probably see everything that I share. And so when you do it with that in mind, it all just starts to make sense. And then you see that. So like I was telling this client that sometimes it's okay to like, I was kind of kidding. I said it hard to say though, but like sometimes I'm like, I just want to say this, so I'll take the bullet. And what I meant by that is like, I don't think this is going to get reached. I don't think this is going to be my like big viral post, but I just want one of my clients to hear this. And so if it's not like the most successful reel I've ever had, it's fine. I don't care. But also, I know how to bring intentionality when I want to have a successful one. So I'll just give you an example because I actually think it might be helpful to have something specific. Let me try to pull it up. Okay, so this is one that I just felt like I like really needed my client to hear. And it was like calling to remind you that you can't be in reaction mode and growth mode at the same time if you want to scale your business. Okay, I did not think that one was going to perform well at all. Why? Because I was talking at them, right? It was like, you can't ... right? I don't think it was super shareable, like maybe in the sense of like someone might send to someone else being like, oh shit, yeah, I need to think about that. And I don't think it's something a lot of people would naturally want to comment on of like, oh yeah, shit, I'm stuck in reaction mode, right? Like, it's probably not what a lot of people want to say, right? So it can be okay to be like, this one just feels important for other reasons and I'm still going to share it, but also not expecting that that one's going to like blow up. That one actually got like a decent amount of likes, but very few comments compared to like what I'm used to, all that kind of stuff. And so it's just good to see that, right? Where something else like this one, where I said POV, that part of being an entrepreneur where you're overwhelmed by being the CEO and in charge of everything and think it might be easier to just have a job while simultaneously realizing you're totally unemployable and never want a job again. That for me is way more like emotionally based, right? And I'm sharing it from like I get that, I've been there kind of place. And so that one's going to get a lot more shares. It's going to get a lot more comments of people being like, oh yeah, fuck me too. That kind of thing. And so like just the difference in performance of those is really obvious, but both have their own reason. Like one still served me immensely, maybe even more, that didn't get a ton of reach. But it's also helpful to know that like if you can think about it through a specific lens, you can be more intentional about the outcome you want. Michelle said, love your intentionality behind everything, Lacey. Very much relate to that. I feel like you have this conversation a lot around podcasting too, when you talk about conversion versus growth. Totally. Deborah said, I guess where I'm getting stuck is what if your experiences don't necessarily match your ideal clients' experiences? How can you still connect? I'm thinking about done for you service providers, for example. I mean, I think it's okay if you know their experience and talk to it, even if you're not saying it from your angle, right? Like, so that POV one, for example, like you could do a POV of them, right? Without it having to be your exact experience. But I also think you can talk a lot about your experiences in clients' businesses, right? So like, POV, you love working for that one entrepreneur who ... even as an example, and they can be like, oh, I'm that entrepreneur, right? But also, you know, and like, this is just worth saying, Deborah, like, take it for what it's worth, and you can feel free to tell me what you think there. Like, as a done for you provider, I would be like less worried about getting more of that traction and reach than I would if I was like a course creator or a coach or whatever. Because as a service provider, you're going to get a lot more referrals. And when people follow you, they're probably not going to follow you for like a long time. They're going to like find you, want to binge your content pretty quickly, see if you're a good fit, book a call. So I would be thinking about more like, what do they need to see from me when they hit my page? That's going to move them more quickly to a call, right? So I wouldn't be as like, oh man, I have to like really get this out and get this like performing in a certain way. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah, exactly. I think Michelle was like the only comment on there. Maybe there was like one other one. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate you. Okay, love that idea. Good. So again, I think it just depends. And I know all of this is like, you know, kind of, again, like in the gray, but I do feel like it's really helpful to go, oh, okay, that old narrative of just make it about them, where I'm not including myself or my own story or whatever in any of it. It just feels outdated. And I think it just doesn't feel like what's really going to land for people in the same way anymore. We want the emotion, like we want to connect and have that experience. We want to feel like someone gets us and knows us. And like, again, to go back to the fact that like social media is full right now, right? So if we're not creating really great content that does that, it's just Instagram, TikTok, whatever, just isn't going to show it because it's not going to show content for the sake of content. It's going to show content that performs. And that's really annoying. And, sometimes I think about, okay, how can I be someone who people want to come and seek out my content, even if the algorithm doesn't present it? I think that it can be really important to think about still. Like, so I feel like I always try to comment on like industry changes or things like that. And so my hope is that, okay, even if the algorithm isn't showing it, if somebody's like, ooh, I wonder what is going on with this, that they might still look at my page and come to my page to go, I wonder what Lacey has to say about that. Okay, great. Macro, that works. But micro, if I want them to make a difference, I really do feel like I have to connect with them in a bigger way than ever before. And I think that takes a lot of thought and intention. And I keep talking about that because I think that so many people think, gosh, it should be easier. And I think that, like, yes, to an extent, it can be quite easy to make 6 seconds of B-roll, put some writing over it, and put it up. But also, I think the part that we have to bring to it more than we ever have is like that 6 seconds of B-roll, again, with something over it, like 5 things you should do to grow your business this week, just isn't it. Like, even if it only takes 5 minutes. So I feel like that's important to have that context. This is why I struggle with viral content. I'm convinced my brain does not process like other people. Michelle, I'm sure there is some viral content and you're like, oh, my brain gets that you could go off of. Deborah said, I see that is very helpful. I think that's the disconnect between what I've historically done as a done for you and now shifting to coaching. The different perspective of what they're looking for in my content is helpful. Yes, totally. I think how you would market as a done for you provider versus how you market as a coach is wildly different. And so trying not to overlap the two like makes a ton of sense for you. Kate said people care more than ever that their values are reflected and respected. So I think even without the same experience, knowing that someone is seen and heard in their experience or their values can make a huge difference. 100%. Could not agree more. I think it's like you want to feel gotten and not in like a superficial way of like on a sales page. It's like, if you're blank, 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 right? Like we want to feel like, oh my God, how did she know that? Right. I did a reel recently about like a lot of women overworking. And so many people reached out to me from that one specifically. And they were like, oh my God, you're in my brain. How did you know that? Or like, I've never related with something more, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff where someone like you're officially on someone's radar then, So I think it really is important to be able to showcase that. And like Kate's saying, it's not like you just have to do it through like only your own personal story, although that's obviously a great way to reflect your values. But I really think like the ultimate piece is like, it's about them because they need to feel seen. But some of the way that we do that is how we position it. Right. And again, I just think sometimes it's easier to digest. Like I know sometimes if I really have like a big aha, it often doesn't come from someone like saying to me, hey, have you thought X about you? Often comes from like hearing a story about something someone else went through or connecting the dots in that way. And so I think it's just about how to like kind of receive some of this stuff and process it. And the way in which we're doing that being through storytelling and stuff like that. Again, also, I think in the era of ChatGPT, where we could all spit out a million things, like 5 things to do this week to grow your business. What stands out from that content is the story, is the personal piece. But again, I will say as someone who like resisted that for a long time and doesn't always love feeling obligated to share my life, I actually still don't feel like I share very much of my life on social at all. I feel like I very much share my values. So I very much share what I believe. I very much share who I am and what I'm about. And I think that's what makes people feel safe to hire me. So I think just remember that too. Like you get to have whatever lines you want to have here. This is not a conversation of like, now you must be an open book and everything's about you and all of that kind of stuff. It's really more a conversation of like the lens and the frame. We need to be in a really relatable, really like emotionally based, I think, values based, like Kate said, way that lands differently than what we were maybe doing 3 years ago, whatever, with, the do XYZ thing kind of, right? I think so many people are still kind of trapped in that and are even a little bit like, why would someone care about me? Why would someone care about my story? It's so um almost like narcissistic to focus on that. And I really do get that fully. I just think that if we look at what's working and we can say, hey, this is how people are taking on board information the best. This is what people are connecting with. This is what's making them have ahas. This is what seems to be making a difference for people right now. Then I think it gets a little bit easier to apply it, where it's not about you just like talking about yourself all the time kind of thing. I think we all know the difference in that kind of content where someone's just like, look at me, talking about themselves 24/7, and someone that's like intentionally like trying to connect with their audience and make them feel seen. So that is that. I mean, I just think that that's changed quite a bit. It's gotten off the about page and into social, in a way that, because like that used to be a thing, right? On the about page, don't tell your story, tell your potential client story in a sense too. And I think it's kind of like the same thing here. Like for sure, tell us your story, let us connect with you. But what you're also kind of trying to do is tell a bit of like how they might feel or their story at the same time without it feeling so like in your face or like I've got it all figured out and I'm talking to you like I have. And again, I just think if you look across the board at like performance now, that's what's getting it. And so I feel like, if that's how we can shift to reach more people, to be more impactful, to have a more effective messaging, it's probably not that hard. In fact, it's probably easier in some ways because we get to speak from those personal experiences. So I hope that helps. I know, again, it's not like there's like one specific thing, but just wanted to like use some different, let me see if there's any other examples of myself that I could use. Cause I do think that sometimes it's really helpful to have that. I remember there was one post I did not that long ago and I was like, that's so funny. Of course that tanked. Let me see if I can find it. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm. Okay, I can't find it. But I basically remember that I did a post and I was like, oh my God, that could not have performed worse. I'm kind of kidding, but here's the oh no, that wasn't it either. Anyway, sorry, I'm not gonna waste all of your time on this, but the point is, I just put it up really quickly and I kind of wasn't as intentional about it as I would have normally been. And I was like, oh, of course that one didn't go well. Like I did not frame that as something that was emotionally based. I did not frame that as something that they would feel really comfortable or excited to comment on. There is no reason why they would share that, blah, 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 right? Like it was just so obvious. But at the time I was like, oh, I just want to tell them whatever, I can't even remember what the thing was. But it's so hard because like if we just want to tell them a thing and we don't work on the frame behind it, like sometimes it just won't perform and it won't get seen. And then we really miss the opportunity to get some of our best stuff out there. And I think that's where people go into like the algorithm hates me because this is my best stuff and it's not performing, but I know it's really good. Right. And for me, that's the shift. Like I usually am not like, oh my God, like I suck. People don't want to hear that. It's usually like, did I put it through a lens that they would feel comfortable listen or commenting on, et cetera, everything I just said? That's the first place I would look because I do think that's what has changed, Hey, Katrina, do you think this shift to more stories versus direct sales posts also applies to products in addition to service-based businesses? I don't think like it's like don't show your product in direct posts, but I think show your product in a way that is maybe like more storytelling still applies there for sure. So I wouldn't go too far in being like, if I have a product, I'm not going to do a direct sales post on it. I think again, it's kind of just more like the frame, like what would make people want to engage with that? What does that pull out of them? What would make them go, oh, I want to share this with someone, or oh, I want to, comment something on this. That's what I would be thinking about. And again, not that I always hesitate because it's not like engagement shares or likes are direct indicators of sales. Trust me, I'm in data all the time. They are not actually, right? However, they are the starting point to a lot of what we're trying to do on social media in terms of like growing that reach, getting more people to learn about our products, whatever. So if it's not something that's going to add to that a bit, then I would be a little more hesitant, you know what I mean? Or I would do it sometimes, but not a lot. But if you can wrap the two together, I think that's when you win. You know what I mean? Like you see so many products that have like kind of like these like really engaging. Like I see someone do this with their podcast a lot. Like I can't remember what her podcast is called. I wish I could. I sent it to a client the other day though, because I was like, this woman is nailing reels. But she would say something like really, really personal. And then she would be like, if this is for you, listen, or if like this resonates with you, listen to my podcast. And so you're so captured by this kind of like emotional, evoking statement she's making. And then she ties it to something so similar, like with a product or something, right? Like, what can you tell us about the product that like really stirs something in us or that we maybe want to share with a friend or whatever? And then certainly you can still talk about the product, but I think you need to capture us in a different way first. You know what I mean? Totally. Kate said, I think with products, user generated content can be way into that piece too. Yeah. So I feel like, it's the same thing though, right? Like we want the people, we want the stories, we want the connection. So I feel like similar, but obviously like, I think I just want to be careful not to say like, yeah, let's not do direct sales posts. Cause like, obviously that's not it, but I think there's just like more to it than that. Good. Okay. I hope that helps. Sometimes we're left with like just more to think about than one thing to go do. But I do think if you think about it through that lens of like what gets me more of this long term in terms of like the connection, all of that, it does get easier. And it doesn't mean you still don't think about like, hey, what would make someone come back to my stuff, even if the algorithm wasn't sending it. But you also don't want to like bet wholly and completely on that. So middle ground. I hope that's helpful. I hope that you guys have a beautiful Monday. You commented questions to ponder always, Michelle. Yes, that seems to be the theme, doesn't it? Okay, that's all I got. I hope that you guys have a beautiful week. We will select our gift card winner, and thank you guys for hanging with me as always. I appreciate you. Bye.